Hi, this is Catherine. This is Taking Tea with Catherine. This is Mincing Lane breakfast blend from Upton Teas, which is one of my favorite companies, and this is really becoming one of my favorite teas. It's just, I don't know, it's just hitting the spot, you know? And I really like this mug. I've showed this before. I bought it in Barnes & Noble a while back, but it's perfect, you know? All the beautiful books surrounded by, and a kitty cat. Isn't that great? It says, take a sip, turn a page. And again, it says, take a sip, turn a page. Which is what we do, isn't it? So I thought I'd do a little mid-month wrap-up, as it were, because I've already read quite a few books. I'm going to leave out the two mysteries, because I'll do a separate tea mystery for those, and I might read another one. I don't know. It is a great month, I've noticed, not just for me, but a lot of booktubers that I like are talking about mysteries this month, and yeah. I always say that I really start to gravitate to that genre. Even though I read it all year, it really starts to appeal to me when the weather gets colder. Nothing like being at home, you know, with the wind blowing outside and etc. So it's fantastic. I just kind of miss going out to cafes and reading there, but I mean, sometimes there are things in life you just can't do. So I've already finished 6 books this month, which is a lot for me at this point of the month. But I had attempted to finish books that I'd already started, so I'd already made progress. So, and that's good. And I so far pretty much like every book that I've read. I think I'm gonna keep reading at the same pace. I still have some days off coming up, obviously, like most people do this month. But I had a few that I already took. So I was able to catch up on some reading. But I also have been using this month to watch The Office, the United States version of The Office, for the last time before it leaves Netflix. Which is probably why my hair is starting to look very Dwight Schrute-ish. Bears beats Battlestar Galactica. Which actually, that makes sense. I took a staycation one December and like watched the entire Battlestar. I can't even say it. Galactica. So I guess this is the kind of month for that sort of thing. But I feel like I've been balancing out my TV watching and my reading pretty well. So here are the books that I finished, and I'm quite happy about that. This first one, well, I don't think it will be my favorite of the month, but it had its moments. Take Courage, Anne Bronte and the Art of Life by Samantha Ellis. Now, what this does well is it does keep one interested. If you are all interested in the Brontes, this will keep you reading. It's not a very big book, so there's not a lot to, go on about things that are not necessary, pretty much. Although I'm really, really, really wanting to read the Juliet Barker, I think it's what it's called, book about all the Brontes. I think I just really need to start that. I don't know if I'm going to start in January, but I kind of want to at this point. It's a very big white tome. It just feels right. I mean, it's about to snow here, so that really feels right about now. But I told myself I wouldn't start anything else unless it was a library book. So, but back to this book. Okay, so I started this probably in was it January? And then I left off because I realized I was getting too many spoilers, and I hadn't finished Tenant of Wildfell Hall yet. And I said, let's hold off. At first I was angry at the writer, and then I realized that was on me because I had to realize that, of course, if someone's going to set out to write about the life of Anne Bronte, she's going to probably draw a lot from her work. And that is kind of, Samantha Ellis, that's kind of what she does. She's trying to prove, I think, that Anne Bronte was more radical, I think, than the rest of them, more forward-thinking, I don't know. And she had to use her writing, and she had to use her relationships with the other sisters and whatever she had on hand. So she did. So part of it's a little bit of a memoir, because she talks a little bit about her own relationship with her boyfriend, then fiance, and I guess then husband. I don't know. I can't remember. But it already the first paragraph of the description says Anne Bronte is the forgotten Bronte sister, overshadowed by her older sisters, and it's like, I get that, and she is. I don't know why. I seriously don't know why. Although I do figure, I mean, the blame is probably put a lot on Charlotte, just basically making Anne out to be the saint and then maybe covering up some things that she wrote, like poems or whatever. But it doesn't make sense to me because Anne published 2 books in her lifetime. Emily only 1. And the 2 that Anne published, Agnes Grey and The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, were fantastic to me. And I don't understand. Charlotte lived longer, not much longer, but longer than they did. So she had a chance to like kind of solidify their reputations, I guess. And so I think this writer attempts to kind of take the spotlight away from Charlotte and does a little bit of the thing that people do when they write an individual biography of one of the sisters, which is kind of pit them against each other a little bit. I don't care for that too much, but I could put up with it enough. There were a few things that she would assert. Oh, I really want to believe that Anne was like this and this, because she wanted to believe it was like that. And that, I get it, it's about the writer too, but I'm kind of like, I really just want to know the facts, and speculation should really just stick to being speculation. And to delineate that very clearly, but it wasn't a complete mess. It was still a good read. My big warning always is the spoilers, because yes, okay, it's okay that she spoils Anne's works. Even Charlotte's is a bit okay, what do you expect? But then she goes on to a lot of different writings and sometimes gives away things. I don't know if I mentioned this in my last mention of this book. I might have, because I don't remember what I was up to. But toward the very ending, she gives away a pretty big event in Anne of the Island by Ella Montgomery. Which I was like, are you kidding me? Come on. Can you not give away everything? Thankfully, most of the books, if not all, most of the books were books that I'd read already. Thank goodness. Which was a coincidence, too, because, there's plenty of books I haven't read. And it was funny because she was talking a little bit at some point about class and how certain people would deem people of a higher class to be of better morals or whatever it was, expect certain things out of them. And she quoted a woman, I think her name is Lady Eastlake or something. Yeah, and it was funny because I just recently saw, because it just came on Netflix and I have Netflix, Effie Gray, which is based on Effie Gray, who married John Ruskin, and their marriage was a complete mess. And if you could even call it a marriage, and then, she, of course, comes to knowing the Pre-Raphaelites, and from there. But she also meets, I think her name was Lady Eastlake, I think it was, played by Emma Thompson. So it's like, it's hard to not take the side of someone played by Emma Thompson. I don't know what it is about Emma Thompson, but I always seem to take her side. Anyway, but yeah, I would say if you are a completist and you like to read a lot of anything there is out about the Brontes, this is not a bad idea, but just be prepared for the spoilers. Okay, I also finished, at long last, not a judgment on this book whatsoever, Ring the Hill by Tom Cox. I'm sorry, there's traffic outside. Yay, a little bit of a soundtrack to our life. He has basically what I call a series of ongoing memoirs, slash rambles, slash folkloric exploration, and slash humor. How much slash am I going to say? Because he's written about other subjects too. Tom Cox was a writer for others, and then now he writes for himself. He does a crowdfunding sort of thing. But I got into him because he wrote a number of books, mainly memoirs about his cats. But of course he would write about his own life too. And so then he decided to focus mostly on his own life and go from there. And that's what he's been doing for most of the books. I think there's one that I haven't read of these books. But Ring the Hill was good. It gets into the different places he lives at this time, and about the history of the places he lives a little bit, about the people he meets along the way, about the animals he meets along the way, different activities, his family. It's humorous, but not like constantly trying to be funny, And I like that. He's an interesting person to read, and I don't know how to describe him otherwise, but I do recommend if that sounds good to you. Only thing was, I knew, and I procrastinated on finishing it because I knew he was going to talk about the death of his cats, the last two cats that died, because he has two living right now still, I hope. And I knew I was going to have to brace myself for that, and I did, and I got to it, and I was still sad, but I was okay. And then, of course, I found out that another cat that I'm invested in, that I've never met, because, internet cats, died just last week, which is Sylvester, the talking kitty cat, his owner died very tragically in April. I mentioned him in April this year. And Sylvester was about 13. He just turned 13, but so he was a bit of an older cat, but still, I don't know. I kind of think that maybe losing um, his guy, Steve Cash, might have affected him too. I don't know. I think grief affects cats a little bit. So then it was like, just when I thought I was being able to handle one, famous cat death, and here comes another one. So that kind of whatever. But that doesn't take away from the actual enjoyment of this book. This was so much fun. If you like the thought of roaming the countryside of England with somebody and hearing them just talk about things all the time, this book is for you. Okay. So the last two books I have here are library books. So let's talk about them, and then I can return them to the library when I next get there. And this was Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. A novel of the plague. Sounds so cheerful, right? Yeah, it was not really cheerful, but it wasn't like one depressing moment after another. It was a good book in a lot of ways. The name William Shakespeare, the name William, none of those names are mentioned in this book at all. But it is definitely about William Shakespeare's family. His son's name was Hamnet. He did die tragically young, and that is basically what this is about. It's about his family. William Shakespeare himself, the writer, whatever they call him the Latin tutor at some point, the husband. There's all kinds of names for him. Is often out in London, promoting his plays, being in the plays, writing his plays, etc. So he's not in the action very often. So it mostly centers around his wife, who is called Agnes in this story, which apparently in some of the records, Anne Hathaway's name was listed as Agnes. I don't know. It could have been both. But her last name was never mentioned either. It's a lot about how she first meets her husband and how they, eventually have children, and then of course how she deals with the sickness and then loss of her son and the grief, and of course the relationship with her husband and family and all the repercussions thereof. And it was really beautifully written, and I totally recommend this. I keep saying I totally recommend this, but I do recommend this very much as a great story to read. I also think it's good in a sense. They mention the Queen like once, but usually when I read Tudor era books, there's always like someone popping in saying, "Hey, have you heard what the king did? Have you heard what the Queen did?" And it's like, even though I think they probably talked about it amongst themselves, I'm sure a lot of people were busy with daily life and not as affected by what, the royals were doing. Unless they were rebellious people, which wasn't hard to be, in those days. But anyway, but I did have one thing that I didn't care for, and that was making the wife, Agnes as they call her, this kind of Earth Mother, sort of witchy, sort of special abilities I can't explain. She comes, her mother came out of the woods and married her father, or I think got married to her father, or at least they had kids, and then so the daughter, has all these abilities with herbs, which, isn't the strangest thing, but she could tell things about people. And I was like, was that necessary really for this story? Can't they just have like a wife? Like, can't this just be about typical people? Yes, I know Shakespeare, assuming he is the writer, which I'd like to assume he is the writer of the Shakespeare plays. I know that just by those accomplishments, that makes him an extraordinary person. So you think he might be drawn to some people who were slightly different, but still, I feel like it wasn't necessary. And I also think that how would we have not heard of this, his wife being so strange? Like, how hushed up would it have to have been? So that kind of took me out of totally, here comes that word again, of completely enjoying this story. But otherwise, I did. Yeah, so if that sounds good to you. A couple of things that I did like, if you could say like, was how the funeral was written, the description of grief, really, how they talk about a certain mention in Shakespeare's will that is a bit of a contentious thing that people talk about sometimes, which you'd have to read to understand here. So that was But if you know what I mean about Shakespeare's will, then you'll know what I mean. uh, and also just a chapter about how the plague could have arrived in the area, Stratford. You know, how it could have come from far away and somehow made its way over. Even though at this time it's hard to read about stuff like that a little bit, it was still fascinating. Just get ready for a lot of dead cats, which obviously, you know, how many more dead cats do I need to read about? Okay, last but not least, this is also quite a heavy book, by the way. Solutions and Other Problems. I actually finished this one by Ali Brosh. I liked it. I read Hyperbole and a Half many years ago, and Ali Brosh uses these kind of, I think they call it crudely drawn cartoons, to describe her life and her struggles with, you know, depression, with anxiety, with all the troubles that she has to deal with, all the awkwardness, her childhood. Kind of humorous, but not. I didn't really like roll on the floor with laughter. Not that I ever really do, but you know what I mean. There were moments that were kind of funny. Sometimes when she read about certain animals, that was kind of funny. There is something that happens toward the middle of the book that is, I can't hold up the book, it's too heavy. It is unspeakably tragic to me, something that I would hate to deal with in my own life. So it was, when I saw, I didn't realize it because I haven't really read up much about Ali Brosh recently. I know she kind of disappeared off the face of this earth, at least on the internet, for some time. So now I kind of understand why. And yeah, just dealing with her relationships and the breakups of certain relationships, other ends of relationships, and different pets and different strange people that comes into her life, and sometimes the strange person is her. I was gonna say, you know, because I think I saw a YouTube video and I haven't watched it yet, but Jenny Lawson, who writes some books that I've mentioned here too, about dealing with certain things like mental illness and other things, humor and everything, and sickness, is like in a conversation with Ali Brosh. So I thought, wow, that is probably a good, sneeze coming. It wants to come, but it's just gonna sit there. That's fun. So I thought that was a good combination of people. I have to watch the video though. You know, people who deal with the struggles of their life and really rough times sometimes, with sometimes humor and sometimes just different types of creativity. I think that's good, and I am drawn to books like that, but I find that I can't overindulge in them either, because that could end up bringing me down. But yeah, so she's back, and if you can get a hold of this book, if you liked her before, then I would recommend it. But if you can't deal with sadness right now, maybe not. You know, although there were some really funny parts about her daydreams and how kind of embarrassing they are, because, you know, thinking about people and imagining if they could see what you were thinking. That was pretty real in a way. So that's all of the non-mystery books that I've read so far this month. Let me know if you've read any of these, what you think, if you agree with me, if you disagree. None of these books I would say are bad books at all. I know Hamnet is a very well-regarded book by many, and I do think it is a good book. That whole thing about Agnes, that just kind of didn't do it for me. Still gave it 4 stars, just not 5, which I would have thought I was going to give it, you know, from what I heard about it. But anyway, so that's all for now. If you like to talk about these kind of books, please subscribe, and please like the video, etc. So this is Catherine taking tea with Catherine. Have a lovely tea and book-filled day. Bye-bye.